I can still remember that evening vividly. It was raining softly, and the warmth of the room enveloped us as he traced circles on my skin. David had his hands wrapped around me, his breath warm against my neck. My heart raced, and my mind spun with emotions I didn't quite understand. This was wrong, forbidden even, but the thrill was overwhelming. I couldn't stop myself. As he kissed me, time stood still. His lips found mine with a hunger that sent shivers down my spine. His hands moved slowly, tracing every curve, igniting every inch of my skin. The room felt warmer, the air thick with desire as he pressed his body against mine. I arched my back, lost in the sensation of his touch. He kissed my neck, trailing down to my collarbone, each kiss more intense than the last. My breath quickened, and my fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. I felt his hand slide down my back, his fingers exploring, teasing, making my skin tingle with anticipation. He paused for a moment, looking into my eyes with an intensity that took my breath away. His gaze was a silent question, a final plea for permission, and I responded by closing the distance between us. Our bodies entwined, fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. He moved against me, and I gasped, overwhelmed by the sensation. It was a rhythm, a dance, one we both surrendered to willingly. Time blurred, the outside world forgotten. His touch grew more urgent, his movements deliberate, yet filled with a gentleness that made my heart ache. The room echoed with our breaths, mingling in the charged air. He whispered my name, his voice raw and filled with longing. And in that moment, I knew nothing else mattered except for this, us. Every inch of my body felt alive, responding to his touch, matching his rhythm, until we both reached the peak of that forbidden bliss together. This is where my story begins. My name is Lily. I was married to Ethan, a kind and thoughtful man, for nearly 5 years. Ethan and I had what most people would call a perfect marriage. He was my rock, the person who stood by me through all of life's ups and downs. We had a cozy little house in a peaceful neighborhood. Everything seemed flawless on the outside, but inside, I was grappling with something I couldn't explain. We had moved into this neighborhood 2 years ago, drawn by the charm of the quiet streets and friendly neighbors. It was here that I first met Daniel. He lived across the street, and from the very beginning, there was an undeniable spark between us. Daniel was effortlessly charming, with a roguish grin and eyes that could pierce right through to your soul. He was the kind of man who commanded attention wherever he went, and I found myself drawn to him like a moth to a flame. It all began innocently enough. Ethan and I would often invite Daniel over for weekend barbecues or dinners. The three of us got along well, and Ethan, trusting as he was, never suspected a thing. But every time Daniel and I exchanged glances, a forbidden current surged between us. It was subtle at first, just a fleeting brush of our hands or a shared look across the room. But the electricity was there, humming and irresistible. One evening, after Ethan left for a business trip, Daniel came over. It was late, and I had just put on my favorite movie to keep me company. The rain tapped against the windows, creating a cozy cocoon inside. When I opened the door to see him standing there, soaking wet, a shiver of excitement ran down my spine. He held up a bottle of wine, grinning that boyish grin of his. "Thought you might want some company," he said. I hesitated for a moment, but then nodded and stepped aside to let him in. We sat on the couch, sipping wine and talking about anything and everything. The air grew thick with tension, and at some point, our conversation stopped making sense. I felt his gaze on me, hot and intense. My heart pounded in my chest as he inched closer, his fingers lightly brushing my arm. I knew what was coming, but I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to. We kissed. It was gentle at first, then urgent and needy. My body betrayed me as I melted into him, forgetting all the reasons why this was a terrible idea. We made our way to the bedroom, leaving a trail of discarded clothing behind us. He pushed me gently onto the bed, his eyes locked onto mine, darkened with desire. His hands moved over me, his fingers tracing patterns on my skin that made me tremble. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned down, his mouth finding mine. His kiss was firm, demanding, his tongue exploring, coaxing a soft moan from my lips. I melted under his touch, my hands slided up his back, pulling him closer, feeling the warmth of his body against mine. His mouth moved to my neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin there. I gasped, my fingers digging into his shoulders. He moved lower, trailing kisses down my chest, his hands exploring, leaving no part untouched. My skin burned with every brush of his lips, every caress of his fingers. He paused, looking up at me, and in that brief second, I saw everything we both were feeling: desire, fear, need. Without a word, he continued, his hands moving down, sending waves of pleasure through me. The room was filled with the sounds of our heavy breathing, the rustle of sheets, the quiet murmurs of our names. He moved over me, his body pressing against mine, fitting together perfectly. I clung to him, matching his rhythm, every movement sending a jolt of electricity through me. It was frantic, passionate, and impossibly tender all at once. My mind blurred with sensation as he pushed us both toward the edge, and together we tumbled into that abyss of shared ecstasy. As I lay there in the aftermath, tangled in shifts and guilt, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed the line I could never uncross. From that moment on, everything changed. I couldn't get Daniel out of my head. Every time I saw him across the street, my stomach did flips. We began finding excuses to see each other. A cup of sugar borrowed, a casual chat on the sidewalk that lingered too long. Ethan remained blissfully unaware, working late hours and assuming our neighborly interactions were just that, neighborly. But one day, things took a turn I hadn't expected. It was a sunny afternoon, and I had just finished watering the garden when I saw Daniel walking over. My heart skipped a bit. He approached with that confident stride of his, eyes locked on mine. "I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered as he reached me, his voice laced with desire. My pulse quickened. I felt a rush of emotions: fear, excitement, guilt, all colliding inside me. Before I could respond, he pulled me into his arms and kissed me, right there in broad daylight. I pushed him away, glancing around nervously, but no one was watching. Yet, the danger of it made my knees weak. "We need to stop this," I murmured. But even as I said the words, I knew I didn't mean them. Later that evening, I couldn't get his words out of my head. Ethan was sitting in the living room, reading a book, completely unaware of the storm brewing within me. I excused myself to take a shower, needing some space to think. As the hot water cascaded over me, I closed my eyes, trying to wash away the guilt that clung to me. But thoughts of Daniel crept in, his hands on my skin, his lips on mine. Days passed in a haze of stolen glances and fleeting touches. I was playing a dangerous game, dancing on the edge of ruin. The thrill was intoxicating, and I became addicted to the secrecy, the adrenaline that came with every encounter. Yet, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. But I couldn't stop myself. Daniel's touch was magic. I couldn't resist it. He was all I thought of when I was in the shower. I wanted him so badly that I was ready to risk the beautiful life I had built.